say our la'asok b'divrei Torah blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher banu zechutav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and command us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So, a quick review from 2 weeks ago, since we were off last week. Our topic this evening is the Me'ein Sheva. The Me'ein Sheva is a mini repetition of the Shabbat evening Amidah on Friday nights. It came to be because there were daily sacrifices in the temple in the morning and in the afternoon, and then sacrifices, the leftovers of sacrifices were burned in the evening. This was something actually referred to in the very first Mishnah. And so when the sacrifices were no longer offered and the temple had been destroyed, then sacrifices were replaced with prayers. And there was a morning service and an afternoon service replacing the morning and afternoon sacrifices. And then there was an evening service, but since it was only replacing the burning of the leftovers and not the actual sacrifice itself, there was some dispute about whether or not the evening service was obligatory. This, in fact, led to the president of the Sanhedrin being impeached over this question. And then it was settled by saying, yes, it's obligatory, but we will not repeat the Amidah out loud in the evening. However, since people were coming late on Friday nights from the fields, and there was a concern that it wasn't good to be walking home alone, this Me'ein Sheva was instituted as a way of ensuring that latecomers could catch up so everybody could go home together. Questions about that? I know we talked about this last week, but not everybody was here. So questions about this? All right, seeing none. The first part of the Me'ein Sheva is Vayichulu. Vayichulu is a quote from the Torah. It is from the story of creation, and this is the verses that describe the seventh day of creation and how God rested, God finished God's work, and God rested and blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, making Shabbat the very first thing that is considered holy in the Torah. And then there were tunes that we went over last week, but you can look at the videos this time again. Latin tunes, Here Comes the Sun tunes, as a parody of the Beatles song. And now we have Me'ein Sheva, which we started last time, but since this is where we are going to be picking up this time, we're going to read the text again as a reminder. Okay. Cindy, would you read our text, please?
Praised are you, O Lord our God, and the God of our ancestors, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob, the great, mighty, and awe-inspiring God, the God most high, creator of the heavens and the earth. Shield of our ancestors with the divine word, guarantor of life to the dead, holy God beyond compare, who bestows rest to God's people on the holy Shabbat, who takes pleasure in them and invites them to rest. We will serve God with awe and fear and offer our thanks to the divine name day after day. The source of blessings, God worthy of thanks, the master of peace, sanctifies Shabbat and blesses the seventh day, causing to rest in holiness a people overflowing with delight, this day that recalls the act of creation.
Thank you. And then we have some a fair bit of context, 4 paragraphs, so you could either read more or pass to someone else.
I pass on to anyone you like.
Great, thank you. Naomi, want to have a go at it?
Okay. Context. This is the Magen Avot prayer. It encapsulates the 7 blessings of the Shabbat Amidah into one prayer. Note that the traditional Nusach mode for this section of the service is called Magen Avot. This prayer requires a minyan, 10 adult Jews, because it is like a repetition of the Amidah. Passover is considered a time when God is extra watchful over the Jewish community. So we don't recite this paragraph, since it starts by describing God as a shield. On Shabbat Shuvah, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we replace Ha'el HaKadosh, Holy God, with HaMelech HaKadosh, Holy Sovereign. The introductory paragraph before Magen Avot starts the same way as the Avot, first paragraph of the Amidah. It deviates after El Elyon by going straight to Konei Shamayim Va'aretz instead of Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol. This is a more faithful quote from Genesis 14:22. El Elyon Konei Shamayim Va'aretz, and that connects back to the Vaye Hulu prayer, which also references Shamayim and Aretz, heaven and earth. By doing this, the prayer makes the point that Shabbat is the culmination of the creation of heavens and earth and everything on them. Additionally, like the first blessing of the Amidah, the first part of Magen Avot is a quilt of quotes from the Bible. For instance, Elohai Avraham, Elohai Yitzchak, Elohai Yaakov, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob, comes from the burning bush, Exodus 3:15, when God tells Moses to tell the Israelites, this is who sent him. The question could be raised why the Torah doesn't say words by saying the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. One answer is that each of them had their own relationship with God, like cousins might have their own relationship with a grandparent. So it was like different gods. It is worth noting there are 2 versions of the words from Magen Avot. Most texts use Me'ein Habrachot, meaning like the blessings, as in not the full blessing, but something like them. There was a version found in the Cairo Geniza that has Ma'on Habrachot, meaning source of blessings. This is probably the original version. Magen Avot ends with Zecher Lama'aseh Bereshit, a memorial to creation. Abu Daraham points that while Shabbat is also associated with the Exodus from Egypt, per the Deuteronomy version of the 10 Commandments, the most fundamental meaning of Shabbat is a commemoration of creation. Creation came before the Exodus, and it's also in the first version of the 10 Commandments, the Exodus version.
All right, thank you. That was a lot. All right, questions or comments about this before we jump into our first discussion question? All right, if you have questions, you'll raise them later or email me after you've had a chance to look at this. So here's our first question. There are 7 blessings in the Shabbat Amidah. The Me'ein Sheva, and particularly the Magen Avot blessing or prayer, encapsulates each of those 7 blessings with a phrase referring to the whole paragraph or a set of paragraphs. So we're going to look at each one separately and talk about them. Starting with Magen Avot Bidvaro. The first time the Torah describes God as Me'ein, or shield, is in Genesis 15, when Abraham is concerned about his legacy. What do you hope your legacy is?
I hope I'll be remembered as a good mother and grandmother.
I hope I can be remembered as be able to give more than I take.
I would say what I hope for with my legacy is the effect of a lifetime of touching other people's lives, both as a clergy, as a chaplain, and as an educator, and as a parent.
To make it easier on those that come after me, I would say I hope that I'm not remembered as a bad person. Oh, what's bad than what is good.
I hope that I can have a legacy that, as an artist, is having a positive impact on the world around me, um, and also just being able to like help other people and have that be part of, I guess, my legacy.
Yeah, I would hope that my legacy and be remembered as someone who was helpful to others.
I would want my legacy to be what my grandfather's was, to be what he got from the Judaism and what I saw, and it was the way he lived his life, is to not hold grudges, don't hate, and don't judge other people.
I guess I'd hope mine is that I leave things a little bit better if I can, at least not worse. Not particularly ambitious, I suppose. Yeah.
Not everybody has to answer.
Other legacies?
I hope I'll be remembered by generations of preschoolers for reading stories.
Like to be remembered for fulfilling the covenant that took us out of Egypt, that we serve God as God's servants, and we walk in his paths. And although I do an imperfect job of it, I'd like to think that I tried hard to do that, and I'd like to think others at least thought that much. That I was contributing to the positive fulfillment of the covenant.
I could easily say that I want to be remembered for all the things that I did in my work as a social worker, but that's kind of obvious. But I'd like to think that I'll be remembered for other kind of activities that are things that are important to me, that I've been able to make them better and more long lasting for other people when I'm gone. And I guess I would hope especially that what allowed me to do that was my Jewish values.
Other legacies?
I would like to second what Herb said, and just add, I would hope to be forgiven for my errors of omission and commission.
It is said that the high holidays have a number of rituals that, particularly in Yom Kippur, remind us of dying and of our death, like wearing a kittel, which is sort of like, it's the white garment that some people wear for getting married in, and also at the Seder and on the high holidays. It's but that's very similar to a shroud in some ways. We don't eat. We don't do other things that people who are dead don't do. And the idea is that rather than being depressing, thinking about our death helps us to better figure out how we want to live. And so we're in the month of Elul, which is the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And every weekday morning, we're supposed to blow the shofar or hear the shofar as a reminder for us to wake up and start thinking about our lives in the past year and how we want to change things moving into the coming year, how we want to repair relationships, how we want to change ourselves. And so this is a good time, whether you've expressed thoughts out loud or not, to be thinking about your legacy while you still have a chance to affect it. And from those of you who shared your thoughts out loud, and what I know of you, it is my strong suspicion and sense that you are all on your way to successfully leaving that legacy that you hope to be left, each of you in your own way. All right, continuing with this theme. The second blessing in the Amidah is encapsulated with Me'ein Metim b'ma'amaro. That if the first one was about God being a shield of our ancestors, the second one is about the dead having life again. And so one way that the dead get life is through how they are remembered. Who is somebody you knew that has died, and what do you remember about them?
My dad was a memorable person. He was a nice guy, and everybody liked him. I constantly I think about that because he just spread good wherever he went.
I think about Marcel Farhi. When she moved here, I was probably one of the first people she met. And I remember her as always loving Judaism, being Jewish. I always think about her at services and how she enjoyed everything. And she was a marvelous cook, and how she would invite everybody for all the different holidays and prepare all the special Egyptian dishes that she made. And anytime I walk in the synagogue, I remember Marcel. and I miss her.
I remember my little bubby who was about 4'9", with her 6 children all around, how happy she always was when everybody came home from their various states where they lived. And there were 13 grandchildren, and she seemed to have enough love in her heart for everybody. She never seemed stressed. She always had a room at the table. It was like magic what she could put in that little Philco refrigerator that was about the same size she was. And, you know, I just have the dearest memories of her, and I learned lessons from her, so that I still use in my life all these years later. That she just was a very special soul. My Zadie too. He was kind of a fun type of guy to be around, but she always had time to scratch your back or give you a hug or feed you or whatever. She just seemed like she never got tired. So I have great memories of her.
David, your grandfather, Dr. Bert Schwartz, the only oral surgeon in the northern part of Minnesota while he was alive, he passed away at age 39, but he certainly touched an enormous number of lives through not only his skilled dentistry and oral surgery, but through his civic activities, heavily up in the Mesabi Iron Range of northern Minnesota, but he even managed to influence particularly Jewish civic activities down in the Twin Cities, since he had grown up in Minneapolis, and he went back there for dental conferences and continuing education. I wasn't allowed to go to his funeral. I was only 11 and a half, but I was told that there were over 400 people at his funeral in Minneapolis from all walks of life where he had impacted their lives. So my blessing on you and your 2 siblings is, may you walk in the footsteps of the grandfather that you never knew.
Thank you. Other memories? All right, seeing none, those of you who shared out loud and those of you who thought of people, may those that we're remembering be a blessing and your memories be a blessing, and may we embody the best of each of those that we're thinking about. Our third paragraph, our third blessing, is Ha'el HaKadosh She'en Kamohu. That's the phrase describing it, talking about God's holiness. So if God is holy and we are supposed to, quote, walk in God's ways, according to Deuteronomy, then what are holy actions that you can take to interact with the world?
You can give charity.
Mm-hmm.
Being honest in my business dealings.
do something for other people that they can't do for themselves, using your own the talents that God gave you.
It's good.
I would say one of those things is if we're also made in God's image, that taking care of your own body and your own self in this world, something a lot of people forget to do, would I would think would be a holy action.
You know, Rabbi Hillel said that we should care for others as we would care for ourselves, and making that the way we walk through our lives would seem to be a way of walking God's way.
You know, to Alan's point earlier, raising up the next generation has to be one of the things we are told most often to be sure we do, whether in our own families or through teaching. Raising up students is paralleled to being a parent. And isn't there that, I think maybe a little commentary on Abraham, isn't there a line where it says he made 400 people instead of recruited or brought along? Or isn't there some commentary that he taught them to follow the same God and therefore made them humans? The more we teach, bring up other people, might be considered a holy action.
Cindy, that just puts a whole different spin on what I do every Tuesday morning. Thank you.
God bless. Good for you, Alan.
All right, I'm going to push this question a little bit further. What are holy actions that you could take at a baseball game?
At a baseball game?
Yes, and I'm not talking about like davening or praying the afternoon service. Like holy ways that you can interact with the world at a baseball game.
You can pray that the guy on third makes it to home if it's your.
I don't know if this counts as praying, but it's maybe slightly, I don't know, mundane, but I think it kind of brings holiness into little moments like that, like saying blessings on things before you eat.
Yeah.
You often see the players cross themselves before they, when they go to bat.
Yeah.
Which is I mean, I see it as I feel like they're in tune with something greater. It's not just a prayer because they want to win, but they've been raised that way to be connected. And it's a natural thing for them to do, give them strength.
You can catch a foul ball before it hits the woman in the head that's sitting next to you.
Baseball game.
I guess if you're at a game, you would root for the team you support, but if you're going to take a holy action, you should probably not boo the team that
Right.
you don't like.
Right.
Good.
Although that takes away from a lot of the fun.
Don't say kill the umpire.
Yeah.
If you're at Wrigley Field, you can patronize the kosher concessions so they can make some money.
That's good.
Along with food, if you see someone around you, obviously he's not having a hot dog or not doing some of the things that are a normal part of the game, you can say, "Listen, can I treat you?" Because there may be someone sitting next to you in the bleachers who had enough money to get in, but didn't have enough money for a hot dog.
These ticket prices, that's probably true.
Mm-hmm.
The Kotzker Rebbe was a Hasidic rabbi in, I think, the 1800s. And he once asked his students, "Where is God?" And the students said, "Well, isn't God everywhere?" And he said, "Kinda, but God doesn't like ugly interactions. God is wherever you let God in." So it's a story that I think about when thinking about how to find God even outside of the synagogue setting, and how to bring God into other places.
What does it mean to bring God in? Or to let God in?
There are those who say that the question is not where is God, but when is God? And that God is the force for good. Because God and good are just one O apart. So when you are cut off by another driver on the road, and you refrain from like sticking your arm out the window and giving them the middle finger, you have brought God into that situation a little bit. There are also those who say, or who notice, that in the Torah, when it's describing the construction of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan, it says that over the ark where the Ten Commandments were kept, both the broken and the whole sets, that there were two angels, and that God was found between the faces of the golden angels. And so from this text in the Torah, people have interpreted that God can be found in the interactions between people. And how
that means that's generally speaking good interactions rather than bad interactions.
Yes, that when you choose to let God into your interaction, God is the force for good. God has given us free will, so God is cheering us on to make good choices with the free will that we've been given. Stuff to think about. All right, the fourth blessing. Up until now, these three blessings have been the same, although the text is a little different for the third one in every Amidah. Weekday, Shabbat, holidays, high holidays, morning, afternoon, evening, it's always the same blessings or the same themes of the blessings. The middle blessing gets switched out. So on a weekday service, we would have 13 request blessings here. But it's considered not polite to request things on Shabbat, except maybe peace. Otherwise, Shabbat is a day for being happy with what we have. So on Shabbat and on holidays, we replace those requests with a blessing about that time period. So here, this is encapsulated with the phrase, Hameniach li'amo b'yom Shabbat kodsho. And this is referring to the idea that Shabbat is considered the day of rest. So, what are restful things that you could do on Shabbat?
Take a nap. Right, Alan? Take a nap.
Yes.
When I was a child and looked around the synagogue during services, there would be a number of people who during a long sermon would have their eyes closed and their head bowed.
Yeah.
I think, does that count? They were being restful.
They were resting, yeah.
Well, I had an exchange with my supervisor a few years back when I was starting a new job out in Rhode Island. And my habit is to, when I'm trying to solve a problem, I sort of recline back in my desk chair and I close my eyes and I'm imagining things so I'm not distracted. They said, she came by and said, Charles, you're sleeping. I'm going to have to discipline you. So I'm thinking about this person you mentioned and during a long sermon or a speech who has his eyes closed. They would be closed and be meditating about what the sermon is about without being distracted by folks that are doing other distracting things at that time. So
I wasn't judging, I was just observing.
Right. What I'm saying is you shouldn't breathe. And yeah, I have also participated in that type of shall I say meditation. And sometimes I find it refreshing and it gives me a whole new insight.
Yeah.
I'm speaking tongue in cheek a bit of at the same time. There are times when that just closing your eyes and listening to something rather than looking at it directly can be very beneficial and restful.
Yeah.
It gives me insights. There's been interesting things sometimes that I'm listening to a sermon or going through some sort of a prayer. There have been some instances where it's given me an insight into something and made me feel much more at ease with my situation. And I can remember one time many, many years ago when my children were growing up and we were in our service in Saturday morning and back in Costa Rica, and I had any number of concerns. As one of the prophets, I can't recall which one, there's something in the verses, and I was very concerned about many things. And as listening to that, I said, everything will be okay. Don't worry. And I always remember that. That's a long story. I'm getting off on a tangent, but you're asking about sharing something. And
thank you. Thank you, Charles.
And it refreshed me spiritually that Saturday morning.
Thank you. Paul, go ahead.
One of my professors in graduate school said that when he was in college, he started skipping the synagogue and sleeping late on Saturday. He was in a city away from where his family lived. And his father, on learning this, became very upset with him. And he never understood this because you're supposed to rest on Shabbat. But his father's position would have been you're supposed to rest in the afternoon. Someone here asked me, what can she do on Shabbat afternoon if she's trying to be somewhat Shomer at Shabbat? And it was kind of an impasse because for a variety of reasons, some things weren't of interest to her or weren't acceptable. And she asked me, why don't I teach Torah classes on Shabbat afternoon? And I said that that was actually my preferred time to do it, but I discovered that no one would come to them. And in fact, she had never come to them.
That's funny.
Yes. All right, question 5. B'fanav na'avod. One way that we can serve God is by making God's world a better place. There are many ways to do that. Which one's called to you?
Well, we try by giving charity, but you never really know how well that works.
Well, one could improve the world by reducing their carbon footprint. And I find recycling in Chicago very difficult and very easy in Los Angeles. I think Los Angeles recycles about 70% of their trash. So we're doing a pretty good job there. Chicago, about 10%.
I found it very difficult when I lived in Los Angeles in the early 2000s. But that was partly because if you didn't have city trash collection, and if you lived in an apartment, you didn't, okay, your building owner was not required to require the trash hauler to pick up recycling. So you had to take it to someplace. And in Los Angeles, going anywhere is nearly impossible. It will take you 2 hours in each direction sometimes.
No, you're absolutely right in terms of apartments. And that's what the problem is in Chicago, is that everybody, in the city, everybody's in big apartments. But things have improved. Things have improved in Los Angeles.
There are city rules that in the apartments, they have to do recycling. There's city ordinances. So all these big buildings have to recycle. Whether they do to the standard of what the city wants is another story. But, in my building, I don't know how good a job they do, but there is excuse me, I got noisy people outside and my window's open. But there's a huge trash compactor downstairs for recycling. So they do have to do some.
One of the problems is the biggest part of the biggest items that could be recycled that are not are really food waste that could be composted and reused for fertilizer or what have you.
That's right.
And that would really cut down the amount of garbage that's buried. But that's the one thing that people don't collect, as far as I know, any place.
In Los Angeles, you put your food, unless you're putting it down a garbage disposal, you put all your food waste in with your garden clippings, and it all gets made into compost by the city.
Yeah. Some cities, especially on the West Coast, require that everyone have a green bin for things that are
right.
Now, in Los Angeles, it's against the law to install a garbage disposal. If you already have one, you don't have to remove it. But no, have been installed for 25 years probably.
Yeah. They also have in Los Angeles, all the water faucets have flow restrictors on them to conserve water.
Yeah. It was a revelation to me to move back to this part of the country after living in Southern California, because here, this is upstate New York, there is not only not a water shortage, there is too much water most of the time.
All right, on that note, Vinodeli Shmo, a big idea in Judaism is having an attitude of gratitude. Who are 3 people who have done something for you this week? Or 1. We can, at this point in the night, let's just do 1.
I have an interesting kind of a gratitude. I'm a retired licensed clinical social worker, and a lot of my identity is tied up in being that. And COVID shot a lot of the possibilities for doing volunteer work. But I'm very lucky that I have two patients who tolerate me, and who spend, I charge a very little amount of money, but they tolerate me and spend time with me for an hour a week, the two of them. And I'm very grateful that I have that, because it lets me still be who I am.
Thank you.
Well, the rabbi and the cantor did something for me on Sunday rather. They had a really good class preparing for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. That was beneficial to me. And the rabbi brought back meditation, which was definitely wonderful. And you opened the door so I could get in the shul, so that was beneficial. Thanks, David.
You're welcome. Okay, recognizing the time, I'll leave the last question about peace between people is often built on relationships. Whom has it been too long since you were in touch with them? I will let you think about that, but we're not going to discuss it. So the tunes, Samuel Goldfarb, who wrote I Have a Little Dreidel, or possibly Israel Goldfarb, his brother, who wrote the tune for one of the tunes for Vishamru and Shalom Aleichem, wrote one of the most common tunes for Me'ein Avot back in 1918. Me'ein Avot b'dvaro, mechayim metim b'ma'amaro, and so on. I have a link to see the original music that they composed for that. There's a different tune. Me'ein Avot b'dvaro, mechayim metim b'ma'amaro, el hakadosh she'en kamohu. You can see that on this recording. Here's a recording of Moshe Kusevitsky, one of the Kusevitsky brothers who are part of the golden age of Chazanut. Here's him doing Me'ein Avot. Here's a Mexican tune for Me'ein Avot. Here's one from Brazil, setting Me'ein Avot to Eliata from Hallel, Karlbach's tune. Me'ein Avot b'dvaro, mechayim metim b'ma'amaro. So that is an interesting way of doing it as well. All right, the final part of the Me'ein Sheva is Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, which is in, I believe, the Amidah for Friday night, Saturday morning, and Saturday afternoon. And the question for you to think about here is that Shabbat is described as an inheritance. Who to pass on Shabbat to you as actual or spiritual parents, and or whom have you passed it on to as actual or spiritual children? So something for you to think about. And then we have videos with the tunes. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, ritzevim nuchatenu, v'arashenu b'mitzvotacha, v'tein chalkenu b'toratacha. That tune was written by Salman Sulzer, who is better known for his tune for the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, same guy. This is Richard Tucker singing a version of that tune. He also came to Chicago. If you want to see more about that, there's a link for that. This is another Kusevitsky singing like that tune. And then there's a tune that is often used here, but is actually meant for Saturday morning. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu ritzevim nuchatenu. And so that tune is used here often, but really should be used somewhere else for these same prayers. So finally, we have an appendix of the Me'ein Sheva in the Talmud, and then Me'ein Sheva in the Shulchan Aruch, which is a law code from 1563. So I will stop the share, stop our recording.